The ancient stone bridge spanned an infinite abyss. Its surface glistened with moisture. Below, abyssal shadows hid any glimpse of the unfathomable depths. Gandalf's sapphire stafflight cast a pale glow upon the towering walls overhead. A low, ominous rumbling intensified, mingling with a ragged, smoldering breath. A small pin of searing orange light bloomed in the blackness. The fiery point flared into twin molten orbs, boring into Gandalf as a towering, vaguely humanoid beast strode with thunderous steps onto the bridge. Before the Fellowship's eyes appeared a massive, monstrous figure of knotted muscle, smoldering with veins of fiery brimstone beneath charred, battle-scarred skin. The stones beneath its feet cracked with each step. One gnarled hand gripped a blade wreathed in seething flames, while the other hand whipped a lash of blazing fire. The Balrog unleashed a deafening roar of pure evil as it lurched forward. Gandalf stood firm, Glamdring's icy blue light cutting through the fiery darkness. There could be no retreat. The fate of all would be decided in their deadly duel on this narrow bridge span. The slender pass shuddered violently as the Balrog's whip met Gandalf's blade in a clash of fire and steel. "You cannot pass!" Gandalf's voice boomed with supernatural force that seemed to shake the very cavern. Raising his staff high overhead, he brought it down upon the ancient stone with tremendous might, splitting the bridge span directly before the demon's feet. The Balrog threw back its dark head and let loose a soul-rending bellow of defiance that echoed through the endless depths. It charged forward with thunderous, earth-shaking steps as the severed side of the bridge crumbled and collapsed into the eternal blackness, yawning below. Their powers detonated in a blinding eruption of light and shadow, concussive shockwaves rippling outward with splintering force. The Balrog's whip lashed out with blinding speed, tendrils of molten fire coiling around Gandalf's legs, searing through his robes to scorch the flesh beneath in excruciating agony. The remaining half of the bridge buckled under the strain of their cataclysmic battle, finally surrendering to gravity. Both immortal combatants were drawn over the precipice together, plunging endlessly down, locked in an inescapable death grapple as they spiraled into the bottomless abyss. Yet even the Balrog's final throes were swallowed whole by the infinite darkness below. Their tumbling forms dwindled from sight, the echoes of their desperate battle cries fading into the hollow, ponderous silence in the deepest obscured chasms of Moria. Before the first glimmers of creation's light, the void resonated with a celestial harmony. It was the divine music of the Ainur, immortal angelic spirits called into being by the One, Eru Ilúvatar. Their ethereal voices wove a sacred tapestry that would give physical form to the cosmos itself. Majestic and transcendent among the Ainur were the Valar, destined to oversee and nurture the realms of Arda once they were formed by the symphony's rapturous crescendo. Radiant and countless, the Maiar, lesser incarnations, echoed their lord's resonance, bound by duty to serve and reinforce their sovereignty. Yet, amid the joyous chorus of creation, a discordant undercurrent rippled through the music's ethereal weave. It emanated from Melkor, the most powerful of the Valar, whose prideful rebellion against Ilúvatar's design soured the celestial melody. As fate would have it, he would become Morgoth Boglir, the Black Foe, seducing many Maiar with his lies and pride, twisting their spirits into grotesque mockeries of their angelic nature. When Arda finally emerged from Eru's primal flame, the corrupted Maiar eagerly followed Morgoth into the newborn world's shadows. Their once pure forms contorted grotesquely as they embraced the darkness, polluting the pristine creation with their malevolence. A thunderous boom rolled across the ashen plains outside the massive iron doors of Angband. The unholy fortress groaned as another powerful quake shook its structure. Slowly, the gigantic doors ground open with an agonizing metallic screech. From the baleful darkness beyond, a hellish crimson glow seeped out like an ominous odor of dread, unleashed at last. The muted thud of deafening, earth-shaking footsteps grew steadily louder as enormous shapes began to emerge. Suddenly, a towering obsidian form stepped into view, silhouetted by the eldritch radiance behind. A fearsome roar of purest malevolence shook the air. Others rapidly followed, blazing titans over 9 feet tall, their thunderous strides causing the ground to shudder violently. Massive obsidian forms, hardened from smoldering brimstone, encased sinewy muscular frames with nearly impenetrable basalt hides. Bestial skulls contorted into leering maws, filled with volcanic fangs, their once radiant eyes now dull, smoldering coals beneath cruelly furrowed brows. Profane instruments took shape in their clawing grasps, the cursed scourges of perpetual flame. Living whips seemed to slither and coil in their hands, hungering for the opportunity to lash out with ravenous tongues of elemental fire. Each vicious tendril hissed and smoldered with sadistic eagerness, as if the scourges themselves could sense any faint spark of light cast upon the apocalyptic darkness these fallen angels had sworn to serve. These were Morgoth's Balrogs, demons of might and terror, who roared in rancid mockery of the sanctity they had not only forsaken, but violently perverted for their own merciless crusade to scour the light of Arda into smoldering oblivion. The Age of Terror had begun in earnest. For ages eternal, Gondolin's white monuments stood inviolable. Peerless, elven craftsmanship, hewn into soaring cliffside bastions. Enchanted waterways flowed in an eternal chorus beneath the night-spanning luminance, until the thunderous onslaught of Morgoth's blight. The Balrog horde surged forth, a dark tide engulfing the once proud streets in a relentless onslaught. Their sinister presence eclipsed the sun, casting the city into an abyss of eternal night. Orc legions, their numbers seemingly endless, poured forth like a plague of locusts, while dragons and wolf-ridders painted the skies with streaks of fiery doom. King Turgon, his resolve as unyielding as the mountains themselves, marshaled his armored forces amidst the chaos. But even the valiant efforts of his warriors were but flickering candles in the gathering darkness. Each clash of steel echoed with the screams of the damned, while the very air crackled with the acrid scent of burning flesh and shattered dreams. In the heart of the besieged city, Ecthelion of the Fountain stood as a beacon of defiance amidst the chaos. With Orcrist gleaming in his grasp, he faced the relentless onslaught of Morgoth's legions converging from every side. Turgon's kingdom lay in ruins, its once hallowed streets now running with rivers of flame and ash. Yet, in the square of the palace, the true struggle unfolded as Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs, descended in all-consuming fire to smash through the final barricades. With unearthly grace, Ecthelion became a blur of silver steel amidst the storm of molten scourges and blazing gales. The ultimate warrior of the House of the Fountain, he charged straight at Gothmog's gaping maw, driven by a ferocity that knew no bounds. Despite the Balrog's hate-filled shockwave, Ecthelion pressed on, driving the spike of his helm through Gothmog's brimstone hide. As the Balrog's towering form crashed backward into the deep waters of the King's Fountain, Ecthelion was carried down with Gothmog, his spirit burning bright even as his battered body was swallowed by the churning torrent. Still, the battle for the hidden city raged on. Acrid smoke furled across the jagged northern mountain passes as the last remnants of Gondolin's population fled in desperate exodus. The crunch of splintering stone and rumbling of dislodged boulders announced the thunderous cataclysm, rapidly cresting the ridge behind them. Relentlessly pursuing the fleeing Gondolin refugees, another of Morgoth's dreaded Balrogs shattered the horizon with its colossal form, casting a searing conflagration that rattled the very foundations of the earth, fissures crackling with blistering magma. Yet, standing defiantly in its path was Glorfindel, the mightiest captain and prince among Gondolin's legendary houses. Despite the panicked exodus flowing behind him, the resolute elven warrior refused to abandon his post against the unholy shadow's relentless onslaught. The Balrog's malicious roar split the stale air, raining hellish embers across the mountainside, its blazing pits burning beneath its brow. Glorfindel, undeterred, raised his sword. Thorundun, its radiant glow challenging the darkness made incarnate. With heat billowing in smoldering waves, the demon unleashed its cataclysmic whiplash of swirling flames, scorching the air itself. Then, with a resounding war cry, Glorfindel surged forth in a blinding cyclone of shining steel and supernatural agility. As Thorondun's luminous arcs deflected the Balrog's punishing firestorms, thunderclaps of force echoed through the tumultuous fray. Engulfed in whirlpools of all-consuming flame, Glorfindel emerged unconquerable, his blade shining with defiant purity amidst the chaos. Locked in a deadly dance upon the precipice's rim, the two adversaries blurred in a whirlwind of flame and fury, their struggle a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who dared to defy the encroaching darkness. At last, the Balrog's mountainous ashen form crumpled wounded over the precipice's edge. Yet in desperation, it lashed out and ensnared Glorfindel, dragging the elf prince over the sheer cliffside to plummet together into the abyss below. The elven warrior and demon were consumed in a blaze that lit the path for Gondolin's fleeing refugees. As Glorfindel's bodily form was destroyed, his spirit ascended, reborn in the undying lands as an eternal hero. Gondolin fell to Morgoth's overwhelming forces despite the legendary heroics of its great lords Glorfindel and Ecthelion of the Fountain. Many perished, including King Turgon himself, who fought to the bitter end, but some survivors, led by Tuor, escaped after harrowing trials. Finding refuge in the southern havens, whispers spread of a final, desperate offensive. When the Valar's armies issued from the west, the Great War of Wrath began against Morgoth. Dark clouds of ash and smoke billowed across the scorched lands of Beleriand as the Valar's incalculable hosts descended from the west. Their coming shook the foundations of Morgoth's domain in the iron hells of Angband. From black gulches and pits, the last remnants of Morgoth's forces poured forth in a desperate onslaught. Grotesque orcs and fell beasts marshaled in repulsive numbers, yet among their roars and shrill cries also came the soul-scorching bellows of the Balrogs, Morgoth's most feared and destructive demons unleashed. These ancient fiery beings moved like smoldering mountains, bathed in perpetual infernal flames. Their obsidian whips lashed out licks of blistering fire, capable of incinerating entire companies in mere moments. The Balrog's thunderous roars caused even the stoutest warriors to falter in dread. Yet the Valar's great captains, mighty Eowyn at the front, rallied the beleaguered free peoples against this final onslaught. Dragons swooped and clashed in apocalyptic displays above, their searing breath withering the foulest beasts. Noble houses of elves and men charged in shining ranks against the endless black tides. And leading some of the fiercest offensives were Gondolin's vengeful captains, driven by hatred for the Balrogs who had destroyed their city. With great tower shields and axes blazing with ancient runes, they hewed through the demonic firestorms towards their hated adversaries. No quarter was asked or given in those cataclysmic exchanges. Balrogs were surrounded, dismembered by elven blades or crushed by enraged elf lords. Those that broke through the ranks were hunted mercilessly until not a single one remained. But some tales persisted that not every last Balrog was destroyed that day. It was whispered that one foul creature managed to flee, entombing itself in a deep, hidden place for an age of dark slumbering and malicious waiting. For in the seemingly endless battles and strikes raging across the depopulated lands of Beleriand, a sole Balrog had indeed escaped the total ruination, slipping through a forgotten passage to take refuge in the farthest subterranean grottos under an ancient mountain range. There it lay, undisturbed and watchful, whiling away the ages after Morgoth's defeat, biding its time until the day it would emerge once more as a bitter reminder of the terrible war and the free people's painful sacrifices required to finally cleanse Arda of Morgoth's polluting darkness. Deep under the towering misty mountains where even the most daring dwarves dared not delve, an ancient presence stirred from its restless slumber, a being of primordial fire and malice that had lain entombed since the First Age, forgotten by the tides of time. Its shadowed lair lay in the deepest roots of the world, far below even the fabled mines and forges of the dwarven city of Khazad-dum. But as the cunning folk of Duran endlessly pursued their lust for precious mithril, their ceaseless digs steadily encroached upon the sleeping demon's primeval chambers. The distant rumblings and tremors were initially mere nuisances, akin to muffled thunder from above. Yet, as the greedy dwarves delved ever deeper, the quakes and explosions became more intrusive, disturbing the darkened creature's slumber. At last, a blinding eruption of flame and thunder marked the awakening of the last Balrog. Towering in fury, with volcanic fissures bleeding from its steps, the stalwart warriors of Khazad-dum hastily armed themselves as the Balrog unleashed its fiery whips, proving their shields and armor feeble against its onslaught. Dwarven bodies turned to charred husks in seconds, causeways collapsing in smoldering debris from the demon's earth-shaking tread. The Balrog's roars echoed through every corridor, signaling doom for the dwarves. No matter how unfaltering their resistance, Duran's folk fell in waves of ruin before its wrath. Within days, the subterranean city was reduced to smoldering wreckage. Its bridges and landmarks collapsed into bubbling volcanic rifts, opened by the Balrog's ceaseless fury. The woeful cries of the injured and dying echoed in perpetual torment until only eerie silence remained, pierced by the Balrog's vengeful roars. Those scattered, wretched few who managed to escape the devastation told tales so horrific they would be etched into the annals of dwarven history. A nameless terror, a living malicious furnace of heat and shadow that turned the mightiest warriors to ash. The Bane of the Dwarodelf, Duran's Bane, whose fiery whips and thunderous bellows resounded like the end of all days, had been awoken at last. A pall of dread and desolation hung over the ruined tunnels of Khazad-dum. Its bridges shattered, pillars toppled amid scorched rubble, ashen remains of dwarven warriors cloven by the reawakened demon of primordial fire. From the blackened core, the last Balrog's thunderous rumbles furled upwards, a brooding, living furnace prowling its reborn volcanic kingdom. For 500 years, it reigned uncontested over the stillness, descending like a tomb shroud upon the forlorn realm, until the drumbeats of Balin's defiant dwarf colony echoed once more, toiling to reclaim their ancestral glory. Their doomed efforts proved a mere prelude to extinction, for the Balrog's vigil never ceased. When their insatiable mining neared its place of repose, it lashed back with unearthly fury. Scout troops were instantly incinerated. Waves of warriors charged forth, only to swiftly meet the same horrific end. The Balrog's elemental hurricane of fire and malice swept through the colony unabated. Its thunderous roars split cavern ceilings in fiery shockwaves of magmatic carnage. Within hours, Balin's reborn kingdom was scoured to oblivion. Once more, the black pits haunted silence, rose and fell with the demon's wrathful rumbles, awaiting its inevitable confrontation with the defiant wizard who dared breach its domain. The wizard and the demon tumbled in a terminal embrace, locked together as they plunged into the bottomless depths. Down, ever down they fell, through an endless succession of lightless pits and emptied mile shafts that seemed to bore straight through the blackened roots of the world itself. Gandalf's robes billowed and whipped around him as they spiraled through the perpetual darkness, timeless winds howling past with every revolution of their descent. The Balrog's form seemed to flare and dim in rhythmic pulses, its air-starved flames engulfing them in waves of intense heat and searing shadows. At last, they burst through jagged subterranean caverns into a vast underground lake, its glassy waters offering chilly respite from the radiant fires above. The sudden impact drove the air from Gandalf's lungs in a burst of boiling vapor. His eyes strained to behold shapes lurking in those hellish depths, hideous monstrosities and ancient dusted bones stirring from primordial slumbers at the sudden cataclysmic intrusion. The Balrog's molten form thrashed and sent up plumes of smoke, its furnace core flickering and threatening to extinguish as Gandalf seized the momentary advantage. With grim determination, he hauled the demon upwards, allowing no respite. He could not permit this last of Morgoth's creatures to find sanctuary in the nameless depths from whence it came. Up they ascended through winding tunnels and cramped crevices, the Balrog's bulk scraping away at the rock, while belching flames that cast their path in bursts of crimson illumination. At last, they reached the foot of an impossibly tall and slender stone stair, carved in a single endless spiral that appeared to pierce the vaulted ceiling hundreds of feet above. The endless stair, it had been known, leading back to the lost uppermost reaches. For uncounted measures, they climbed without rest, the fiery demon leading their pursuit ever upwards, while Gandalf maintained a dogged, tireless march in its footsteps, his body screaming in protest against the endless strain and sweltering heat. Higher they ascended, round and round the spiraling mountain of steps, with only the distant promise of a cold pinprick of wavering light to beckon them on. At last, they emerged upon the windswept pinnacle of Zirak-zigil, that lone mountain's jagged peak thrusting solitary above the clouds. There, the full towering, colossal fury of the Balrog was unleashed against Gandalf in an apocalyptic eruption. Flames whipped across the barren stone as thunderous roars and searing whip cracks of fire lashed out. For 2 long days and nights, their cataclysmic powers raged and reshaped the very mountain. As the second dusk fell, Gandalf pierced the Balrog's core with a blinding bolt of light. Its fiery form went rigid before violently rupturing inward with a despairing exhalation that echoed through the valley. One final roar of hatred rang out as the smoldering ruin teetered and toppled in a searing avalanche off the precipice. In its death throes, the Balrog's cataclysmic weight careened down, obliterating the layers of stone and engulfing the peak in ash and lava. The last flame of Morgoth's demons was extinguished. A deafening silence hung in the wake of the mountain's violent undoing. Zirak-zigil's regal peak had collapsed into a smoldering, debris-choked crater. Ash and vaporized rock furled upwards in clouds, blotting out the darkening skies. The slopes and glaciers of the mountain had been scoured away by the Balrog's last thrashing pangs. Avalanches of superheated pumice and mudflows poured down every precipice, engulfing the once verdant valleys below in scorched ruin. An eerie stillness settled over this lifeless new world, born of fire. No birds called, no insects stirred amid the total desolation. Only wind whispered across the cracked expanses. As the smoke finally cleared, the crater's depths were illuminated. A towering plume of ash rose skyward, dissipating to reveal the scorched silhouette emblazoned across the crater's floor, the seared outline of Gandalf's vessel before his spirit erupted forth. For in defeating the last Balrogs upon Zirak-zigil's ashen altar, Gandalf's spirit was released from its mortal confines by blinding celestial light. Translated by the Valar, he was born anew as Gandalf the White. It would be lifetimes before new seedlings choked over that summit at the world's crown. As the molten scars slowly healed over, the ancient cycle renewed. Yet the heroic deed wrought amid such terror would echo eternally. For here, the last citadel of the Balrog's terror was shattered, freeing the lands from their smoldering plague until the coming of the second music. Explore the deep lore and rich tapestries woven throughout Tolkien's legendarium. Subscribe now and ring the notification bell to unravel ancient mysteries and reimagine the pivotal moments that shaped the ages of Arda.